Hello, AP World History. Welcome to Screencast 1 for Chapter 35, Post-World War I Nationalism and Political Identities in Asia, Africa, and in Latin America. We're going to be looking at specifically desire for home rule in India, based off of Western political ideals. We'll talk a little bit about Gandhi and civil disobedience. In China, we'll see some really monumental changes as Imperial China falls and as struggle of China for China is really sought after by the Japanese group of people called the Nationalists under the Kuomintang, and then the Chinese Communist Party, or who would become the Maoists. In Japan, we're going to see them grow as economic and imperial power and a really high degree of nationalism. We'll also take a little bit of a look at what is going on, or what was going on in Latin America as well. So India, in 1885, the Indian National Congress was founded. And the idea here, in collaboration with the British, was to promote self-rule. This would be an organization that would contain both people of the Muslim and Hindu faith backgrounds. And it was hoped that this would be a good compromise with the British and the Indians for this desire for home rule. Now, when the British joined World War I, they actually had several troops come from India that fought with the British in World War I. After fighting with the British, the Indians really believed, first of all, their opinion of the British overall and Westerners overall went down because they saw what brutality they were capable of. And secondly, they felt like they could rule themselves just as well as the British could. So after the war, there was a lot of social discontent and food scarcity. And so rather than moving to working with the British, they're moving to the opposition of the Brits. The British encouraged the development of the Muslim League in 1906, and one of the reasons for this would be separate from the Indian National Congress, is that because the Muslim minority feared Hindu oppression. Keep in mind, the Hindus were by far the largest majority of people in India, and so laws that were made by the Indian National Congress very well may not include the wishes of the Muslim leaders in the Indian National Congress. Then we have coming on the scene a man named Mohandas Gandhi. Now, I'm sure everyone has heard of Gandhi. The picture on the prior slide was actually of Gandhi when he was a young man who was working as a lawyer in South Africa. He actually studied in London, and he was very well educated and was quite a busy lawyer in South Africa as well, which at that time was very multi-ethnic. And now you see him here as he's come back to India, he and his wife. Now, his wife happened to come from an upper caste family, and Mohandas Gandhi was definitely had taken on the persona of someone from a lower caste. When he returned to India in 1915, he made the Indian National Congress a mass movement. Now, he really, really hoped that this movement would unite all Indians. He was very much what's called a communalist. He really, really believed that the Indians of Muslim and Hindu religious systems could work together. He opposed the caste system, and really his message appealed to all castes, but as you can imagine, particularly to those who were in the lower castes. So here he is in South Africa. You can see he's wearing Western attire, and here he is when he returned with his wife in 1915. Now, we must think of Mrs. Gandhi. If you read your textbook, you'll see that he asked of her some things that were very difficult for her coming from an upper caste family, such as cleaning toilets and things like that. He also had some rather strange personal habits, and again, I'll let you read about that in your textbook. But just I do, want to acknowledge that she did have a difficult time. This wasn't necessarily an easy transition for her. This is a video. This is a picture, rather, of something called the Amritsar Massacre. Because my screencast does not currently link the sound for video, I'm actually going to include this video as a separate link in your on your webpage on Schoology. This massacre, as you see when you watch the video, was really, really an egregious assault by British soldiers on Indians who were assembling peacefully in a place called Amritsar. These soldiers, as you can see here, were lined up and they were instructed to just keep shooting. It was men, women, children, all non-combatants. They had no weapons. And as the people moved to one side and tried to get out, they shot. As they moved to the other side, it was like a square and the gates were closed. And there was really no way that they indeed could escape this horrible, horrible massacre. So remember, what happened in the Sepoy Rebellion, and how the British had really disregarded the Muslim and Hindus regarding the wax paper of the cartridges. Well, this was really even more egregious in the way that they just so violently attacked people who were meeting peacefully. Again, watch that link, please. I will put it right next to the one for this video. So Gandhi, he actually promotes passive resistance. In many societies, people have resisted through active rebellion. Think about the Taiping Rebellion. They weren't exactly peaceful in their rebellion. In fact, they used a lot of battles, and many, many hundreds and actually millions of people died. So I've already talked about the Amritsar massacre that occurred on April 13th, but this was a catalyst for Gandhi to lead a movement for full independence from Britain. India just had to be independent from British rule. Now, it wouldn't happen for a long time, but this is what he proposed, was on something called ahimsa, nonviolence. You might remember this word. I'm going to ask you to think about it. It starts with a J. Chandragupta Maurya actually joined the movement. It starts with a J, and then his grandson Ashoka would become a Buddhist. Do you remember it? Jainism. Okay. Satyagraha is the idea of passive resistance. So instead of attacking, not doing. So the non-cooperation movement lasted from 1920 to 1922, and basically this is just not cooperating with British authorities. Civil disobedience is active disobedience against the authorities, and what was probably the most important thing was the boycott of British institutions. So things like wearing homespun cotton. Remember, we talked about thread count in class. Well, the homespun cotton, like Gandhi is making here, is not going to be as smooth as the British cotton. It's going to be scratchy. It's going to have bumps in it. But that's okay, because that's going to, in their mind, reduce their dependence on British institutions. Also encouraging the cottage industry, so making things out of your home rather than industrialization. Now, this could be a problem for the Indians long term if they're not industrializing, but they felt that it was what they had to do to get out from under British rule. So this final point here is what I just said. They believed economic self-sufficiency was the key to self-rule. The Government of India Act was created in 1937. This created an autonomous legislature and executive arm subject to British control. So this was in response to the civil disobedience, to the non-cooperation movement, and to the other movements like using homespun cotton and things like that. So the British think, well, if we create the Government of India, we give them their own legislative and executive arms, but we just sort of keep an eye on them. Maybe this will work out. However, we're still going to have the problem that we had with the Indian National Congress. First of all, there were still a lot of local princes who did not want to agree with joining this local autonomous legislature an executive arm. There were still Muslims who feared the Hindu dominance in the legislature, and also um, many Muslims were actually indebted farmers to Hindu landowners. You can read more about that in your textbook, but overall, this wasn't looking like a good solution for the Muslim population in India. So this man pictured here, Muhammad al-Jinnah, proposed a partition of India. In other words, actually separating part of India to make it independent and Muslim. He called this place Pakistan. Pakistan will not officially become a nation for at least about 10 years after this, but the conversation is beginning. But something would come in the way, and that was World War II. And after World War II, Pakistan was partitioned off of India. We'll talk about that at another time. Okay, the Republic of China. So you can see in this picture, actually, I'm going to go to another video for this, and I'm going to call this part 1 of chapter 35. Thank you.